Welcome, everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started. We are here, of course, for dissertation defense, and the title of which is Yin Virtues for Modern Psyche, Exploring the Unique Insights from the Chinese Self-Cultivation Tradition. So I'd like to ask the committee to introduce ourselves, and then I'll give you a heads up about what we'll do today. So I'm Dr. Craig Chalquist. I'm former core faculty in East-West Psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And so June.
Oh, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jun Wang, a core faculty at East-West Psychology, and also on the Asian Contemplative Studies and Transcultural Studies concentration. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Titus Yu. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm wearing a few hats. I started the school in 1996 in Berkeley, known as Andrew University. So I still teach there. I teach philosophy and religion. And briefly, I came over to this country a long time ago. It was 1966. My first landing was Madison, Wisconsin, then moved to Seattle, Washington, then came to Berkeley. Since 40 years ago, I've been a Baptist pastor, a minister. I have been involved with the CIS. It goes way back. About 30 years ago, I was asked to teach a summer class on the old campus. And in between times, I've been involved in the same capacity as an external examiner. Great, I'm through.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
So let me give you an idea of what we'll do, and then I will hand this over to our doctoral candidate. So she will have 40 minutes to present her work to all of us. And when she finishes, the committee of the three of us will have some questions for her. And when we finish asking questions, we will go to a separate Zoom room to confer. And at that time will be the opportunity for all of you to ask questions of our doctoral candidate while we're conferring. And then we will come back into this main room and announce our decision. So that's what we will do today. And with that, River, are you ready?
Yep. I will share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you all for taking the time to be here today at my doctoral defense. What a day for me. So I really look forward to sharing with all of you some of the core thinking that I developed in my dissertation in the past few years. My topic is Yin Virtues for Modern Psyche, Exploring the Unique Insights from the Chinese Self-Cultivation Tradition. So the historical premise of this dissertation is that since the 16th century, global history has been characterized by the dominance of masculine thinking, fueled by colonialism and imperialism. This lopsided shift has led to a wide variety of problems such as income inequality, climate change, the distinction of species, and in my view, the most important of it all, which is also the driving factor behind all of the challenges that I just mentioned, is our disharmonized human psyche, lost in a materially abundant but spiritually depleted world. So I asked myself, what can I do in this research? If I can find something that I can help harmonize, that can harmonize the human psyche, bridging internal and external worlds. The thesis. So when we look at the world today, it has become increasingly fragmented and polarized. So can we critique it through another non-mainstream Western worldview to gain more insights? So I chose the Chinese yin-yang oneness philosophical framework, through which we see that our world today has lost its wholeness and harmony by the prolonged suppression of yin and the dominance of yang. So my thesis is that the prevalent challenges of the world today can be examined and discussed using the lens of the Chinese yin-yang oneness view of the world. By discovering unique insights from the Chinese self-cultivation tradition, its yin virtues in particular, the study intends to propose some theoretical approaches for restoring balance within the human psyche to foster harmony internally and externally. So my methodology is a cross-disciplinary hermeneutic approach that combines the exploration of philosophical frameworks, linguistic analysis, and the examination of ancient texts to provide insights into the imbalance of modern consciousness and to identify the potential path toward restoring balance. So all of it within the context of the Chinese yin-yang oneness framework. On language, so let me share 2 quotes to set the stage and demonstrate why I chose hermeneutics as my main method. The limits of my language means the limits of my world, by Ludwig Wittgenstein. Language is the house of the truth of being, by Martin Heidegger. So I've always loved languages myself, and the more I dig into both Chinese and English in literature and in my lived experience with these 2 languages, the more I develop this palpable sense of the fundamental difference in the world that they create for me. From these quotes and probably our own experience with your own language, your own culture, I think it's safe to say that a given language provides a certain structure of thinking that unfolds with certain consequences to a given society in terms of its established norms, such as ethics, morality, religious practices, value systems, essentially everything that is part of what makes a culture different from another lies in the language that presents them. So my dissertation is an effort to present from my research the way Chinese sees and process the world in English. This translating in of itself has been my biggest challenge throughout the process. So there is a theory of communication called the theory of alphabet effect. It states that writing systems critically influence thinking patterns. So specifically, its research showed that Western alphabetic linguistic system is interlinked to the establishment of codified law, monotheism, abstract science, deductive logic, linear cause and effect, and Western duality, in the sense that the boundaries are impermeable and the 2 poles of the duality are independent of each other. So in the process of establishing this theory, the scholars also use the only truly non-alphabetic writing system that is still widely used, the Chinese writing system, as the countering example to prove their theory. So as China didn't develop the Western style of what I just listed, abstraction, classification, or its absolute form of duality. In the meantime, they also recognize that the Chinese culture, while didn't develop the things I just listed, and I quote here, quote, has created its distinctive triumphs in arts, technology, philosophy, and religious thought, unrivaled by any other culture. Why is writing important? Because all forms of writing helps us humans keep a transpersonal memory. Think about that. That is valuable and powerful to our society's preservation and continuation. In this presentation, I want to make sure that whenever I talk about Chinese, it's the written form of Chinese. As most of you probably know that China has many, many spoken dialects. And Chinese people, like myself and many others, are proficient in multiple spoken languages. I speak both Mandarin and Cantonese. The vernacular and phonic differences between these 2 dialects or spoken languages are so significant that they can't understand each other through speech. So why is this distinction of Chinese being a non-alphabetic writing system important? How and if this ensure the continuity of its cultural and philosophical heritage differently than the West? So this writing system was standardized and unified during the Qin dynasty around BC 221. So that is about 2,500 years ago. This is critical as it ensures the writing system's longevity despite phonological changes over time and maintains the consistent meaning across diverse regional speech, like Cantonese in the South and Mandarin in Beijing. And this literary tradition ensures its civilization to sustain and evolve over millennia, holding significance in two critical aspects. One, the values and traditions of the society must withstand generations of scrutiny and examination by its own people, especially the scholars. Two, it allows contemporary Chinese to engage with and build upon classical works directly, selecting and developing what holds value to them at that time. This also suggests that with each generation, there is an increasing wealth of literary works available for exploration and development. So let me give you an example of this continuity in text and meaning. What you have been staring at in the past minute, I hope you find beautiful to look at. These are two calligraphy masterpieces from the most celebrated Chinese calligrapher, Wang Xizhi. This is his name, and this is the time he was around, about 2,000 years ago. So not only that what he wrote, what you're looking at, are still being written and still being used daily today in China, the piece he wrote are still being learned and appreciated today. The piece on the right is a very famous piece that he wrote when he was around, and I learned it in high school, and in today, Chinese kids in high school are still learning this piece. And there are tons of other examples like this. So I am not aware that there is any equivalent parallels of such a literary tradition in any other culture today. I may be wrong, but I'm not aware of it. So this uniqueness of the Chinese language tradition is what makes my dissertation possible, as I can go into the original text that span the past 2,000 years. Another important reason for my work, which is maybe the flip side of the significance of this dissertation, is rooted in the imbalance of the academic discourse, in my opinion, or the predominance of the Western narrative in academic discourse, led me to a questioning of the existing assumption about what is so and why is so of the world. As someone living in both worlds, I was born and raised in China, but I spent most of my adult life, the past 20 years, working between US and China, enabling me to continually deepen my appreciation for the two worlds, for the world expressed through Chinese and English. So with that experience, however, comes a sense of an unsettling disparity stemmed from the narrow or maybe limited modern Western mainstream narrative of the world. So my critique of this mainstream narrative is from its failure to fairly recognize and explore the value of Chinese traditional ways of knowing and being. This oversight is multifaceted. It includes the Western philosophy's reluctance to consider Chinese philosophy equal or worthy since the late 19th century, and contemporary ideological and political tensions between US and China these days exacerbates this further. This pains, but also drives me. So what is this Chinese worldview that I'm talking about? I call it the yin-yang oneness. It's the fundamental philosophical framework of the Chinese civilization. Yin-yang is often described as a pair of duality or dichotomy in the West. That is a very unfortunate misunderstanding of the concept of yin-yang, which is why I added oneness behind the word to stress the most important feature, which is also the starting point to begin understand this concept. Yin-yang is not an opposing pair. It's not a duality or dichotomy. It's two dynamic parts within the oneness that cannot be separated, or they cannot independently exist. They are integral components of a unified process. As the old sayings go, alone yin doesn't beget, alone yang doesn't grow. Yang roots in yin, yin roots in yang. So I'm showing this video because I think it helps convey the onenessness of yin-yang more vividly in a way that's inherent inseparability of yin-yang is easier to comprehend. And if we watch it again, you may notice that there is no clear demarcated lines or boundaries of yin-yang. Through this overarching framework of how Chinese sees the world, that not everything needs to be so clear-cut. It shows that ambiguity is appreciated and respected in Chinese culture, that ambiguity can also be fruitful. So from this animated depiction, we see that the yin-yang oneness is a dynamic process. It's ever generating through the yin-yang's constant mutual integration, containment, consumption. So this oneness encompassed duality holds the key to understanding the root of Chinese consciousness. It's really critical to establish this oneness worldview before we can go in and dig further of how the Chinese self-cultivation tradition is contemplated, conceived, developed, and practiced. Because this tradition is underneath this oneness worldview, and because of this dualistic oneness backdrop, it also explains why balance and harmony within the whole is of the utmost importance. So hermeneutically, the origin of Chinese self-cultivation tradition can be traced back to the Book of Documents, 上书, 慎觉身修思勇. It means to be prudent and attentive to one's body, mind, and always be mindful of one's thoughts and feelings. So self-cultivation really is a direct translation from this quote. So 修 here means to cultivate, to tweak, to prune, and 身 to body, mind, the whole self. So this 修身 is still the primary phrase to describe the self-cultivation tradition. And it's still constantly talked about in modern China. It's not an old, ancient, forgotten concept. So why cultivate the self? So why should we cultivate the self? So there are countless philosophical texts that discuss this question. I selected two. The first one is from the Analects, a major Confucius text. The cultivation of oneself to be respectful and sincere, the cultivation of oneself to make lives better for those around them, to make their people's lives better. Second one from Tao Te Ching, chapter 54. Cultivate them in oneself, one's virtue will be true. Cultivate in the family, virtue will increase. Cultivate in the community, virtue will develop. Cultivate in the country, virtue will be abundant. And cultivate them in the world, one's virtue will be universal. So these two passages are quite similar in their argument, is that it's about self-cultivation is about a better self, which is the first layer or the foundation, then is for the betterment of the community, and lastly, for the bigger society that you're in, for the cosmos that we all belong to. So Chinese self-cultivation tradition really transcends lineages. I have a real story from Dr. Wu that perfectly illustrates this ambiguity. About 15 years ago, he regularly attended a UC Berkeley conference on world religions. Oh, and by the way, he used to teach at CIS. He recently retired. So about 15 years ago, he regularly attended a UC Berkeley conference on world religions, where he presented Taoist teachings. One year, due to another scholar's absence, he switched discussing Confucius thoughts, surprised many longtime attendees. One of them got upset and asked him, "What did Taoism do wrong? Why did you switch your belief?" Dr. Wu smiled and answered, "As a Chinese person, I am 90% Confucian, 80% Taoist, and 70% Buddhist." He further explained and said, "This blend may vary among different Chinese people, but all of us represent a mixture of some sort. It's never one or the other. Monotheism isn't a thing in China." So this reality of the Chinese consciousness plurality is really eloquently summarized by Brooke Ziporyn, a contemporary scholar on Chinese philosophy and religion. He said, "It resists unification into a single set of values of the kind we would find if a single mind with a single idea of good, or the sole creator, or the sole definer of the good. So with that, let's look at a key element of this tradition. So there are many uniquely Chinese cultural concepts and notions that, I cannot find its counterpart in the Western tradition. And I explored a few in my dissertation, but today I'd like to present one of them, is xin. So xin is another good example of the non-dual, all-encompassing concept. So what does xin mean? Xin can mean any of these, and maybe even more, depending on context. So xin is a concrete, abstract notion. Concrete, think heart, center. Abstract, think thought, essence. So it's a concrete, abstract notion that holds physical, psychological, intellectual, and spiritual meanings all at once. It holds the essence of our being, of who we are and what we are. Chinese philosophy professor Karen Lai wrote, and quote, "Xin is the capacity that handles intellection, cognition, judgment, feelings, and affect," unquote. So although the Chinese worldview believes that all beings are sentient, in that, quote, "human beings are organically connected with rocks, trees, and animals," end quote, only humans have this all-encompassing faculty that is conceptualized in Chinese thought as xin. This human xin sets us apart from the other myriad of beings. Tu Weiming, another philosopher, said, and I quote, "Human beings, if they intend to become guardians of the universe, must earn this distinction through self-cultivation," unquote. This is why self-cultivation, in the heart of it, is cultivating the xin of ours. In Chinese, we call 修心. We know that within the yin-yang oneness framework, that balance and harmony are crucial. The value of each aspect is actually context dependent, as in overdominance of yang or overdominance of yin will lead to problems. So why should I choose yin virtues to focus on? So the premise of this dissertation offers one important factor, in that the modern world, driven by the Western thinking, has been going on a, quote, "wild young trip." This is the exact phrase used by philosopher Hudson Smith, as he was describing relentless pursuit of growth and accumulation. Another important reason is that it's inherently easier for us, for humans, to explore, to exploit, to conquer, to accumulate, to be bigger and stronger, and to seek material abundance. It probably can be traced back to our survival instinct. But as humans tries to, as just quoted, be the guardians of the cosmos through self-cultivation, we can't afford to forget this important notion of enantiodromia, common sense known as 物极必反. In Jung's words, and quote, "according to the law of enantiodromia, as well, so well understood by the Chinese, the end of one phase is the beginning of its opposites," unquote. Therefore, emphasizing more on fostering and cultivating the yin quality is necessary. Mencius, another important Confucius philosopher, has a very vivid analogy. So people know that when their chickens and dogs stray or they go outside to eat, they need to bring them back. But people don't bring their xin back when it goes astray. So the way of learning the Tao is nothing but bringing back the straying xin. So like letting chickens roam for food by day, but safeguarding them, bringing them home at night, it symbolizes the balance between expansion and restraint in life. In this analogy, releasing chickens represents exploration, yang, while bringing them back represents protection and care and preservation, yin. So these two can't be separated. This inward looking refers to a process of introspection and self-reflection. It reminds us to pay attention to not only the external knowledge or facts, but more importantly, the internal emotions, intuition, and our conscience. As the focus of this practice is to develop a deeper understanding of oneself and to cultivate one's inner nature, rather than the linear accumulation of information or wealth or stuff like that. Right. So chapter 48 from Tao Te Ching says, the pursuit of learning is daily addition, but the practice of the Tao is daily subtraction. So now let's get into the yin virtues. On this slide, you see the 6 specific concepts that I explored in the dissertation. This is the overview. I won't go into every one of them today. So on the whole spectrum of this yin-yang oneness, these concepts, they tilt more towards yin than yang. So 克, overcome and defeat. 静, stillness and quietude. 足, enough, which essentially the learning is to know enough. 退, going backwards and stepping back. 让, yielding and conceding. 虚, vacuity and spaciousness. And I also added the calligrapher's name who wrote these characters during the time that they were around, again, just to show the continuity of the text and meaning as well. So while I examine these concepts separately, as writing is a linear process, we should keep in mind that onenessness of the worldview, that they are all in, that they're all really interconnected and support each other. So they need to be cultivated together. They reinforce one another. So first one is 静, stillness and quietude. The root meaning of 静 is to express the perfect distribution or placement of colors. A sense of beauty comes through already, at least for me. It has evolved to convey calmness, goodness, quietude, and a sense of beauty, really. When being still and quiet is a virtue that is encouraged in this society, it takes on a strong sense of beauty in that culture. So many Chinese people has this character in their names, especially for girls. And the Cambridge Dictionary defines stillness as total lack of movement or changing of positions. So which doesn't really indicate a strong sense of beauty, since, total lack of, it doesn't have a very encouraging tone to it. So, and then culturally, stillness indeed is not really regarded as something or some state to aspire for in the West. So on Jing's role and value on self-cultivation, personal, I have two passages from Tao Te Ching. Chapter 15, does anyone still know how to be muddy like that? So muddy that through stillness, all slowly comes clear. Does anyone still know how to be settled like that? So settled that through long waiting, fresh motion slowly emerges. I won't go into them all. So the understated value and unassuming strength of the virtue of Jing comes through. It should be received as a foundation and the root of one's life, which enables the emergence or birth of movement, creativity, and clarity. It's through this state of stillness that we can be grounded to let our intuition and inspiration unfold. So this stillness on society, I also have two. I'll just read one given the time. Not desiring, becoming still, all the world will settle itself. So it may seem implausible for those in positions of power today to embrace and practice this approach in governance or problem solving. However, the recent Netflix documentary, The Year Earth Changed, provides compelling evidence for this approach, where in the film, supported by scientists and researchers, highlighted the substantial positive environment changes that naturally occurred during the global COVID-19 lockdown. The human world shut down. The other than human world came to life. Craig, how much time do I have left?
About 15 minutes.
Oh, 15? Okay. So what if on issues like climate change, we can reconsider our language and approach, shifting from a call to action to a call to less action? It signifies a fundamental shift in our mindset and attitudes about ourselves and about others, that we stop assuming that human beings that we're conquerors, we are masters of nature, that we are capable of resolving all problems through increased action. Now I'd like to explore these two Tui and Zhang together. So within the realm of Chinese yin-yang oneness philosophy, as I said, yin-yang are integral parts of a unified process. This correlation is always contextual, relative, and rather importantly, has, quote, no essential value in the terms, end quote. And again, in Jung's exact words, quote, the Chinese sought a way of life that is free of opposites, end quote. In this text of Xi, which is one of the key commentaries of the Book of Changes, or I Ching, Confucius summarizes this fundamental notion. 变化者进退之象也. Changes and transformations manifests as movements of progress and regress in the phenomenal world. So basically, progress and regress are just manifestations of the phenomenal world's ever-changing reality. Who is to say which is better than the other? Or who is to say which is absolutely right or wrong? Right? Why is progress always good and regression always bad? Let's hear what Dao De Jing says on this. Chapter 41. The Tao's clarity looks like darkness. Its advance looks like retreat. Its smoothness looks like a tangle. Indeed, the highest virtuosity is like a low-lying valley. The greatest purity is like disgrace. The broadest virtuosity is like inadequacy. So this really challenges our dualistic linear thinking. These pairs of opposites are well illuminated, showing that a desirable value can come from seemingly undesirable choices or situations. Essentially, absolute can be an illusion. This is also the reason of my work, to raise an awareness of a major non-Western worldview, that there is real value in cultivating the sensitivity to see beyond the superficial level of the seeming unreasonableness, which has long been appreciated and considered as wisdom by the Chinese, transcending mere cognitive faculties. This requires time, requires dedication. It requires the cultivation of the whole self, and as you interact with the world, requires the xin. So why yield, retreat, or back off? We retreat for new space. In this tradition, the virtue of tui and zhang, the backing off, the yielding, is more about the willingness, the awareness to create a fresh space through letting go, as opposed to active striving. Unlike adding something new through active striving or daily addition, which is more masculine and young, the notion, the action of tui and zhang, going backwards and yielding, results in the emergence of a new space from what was previously occupied. This occurs when you step back and make the space available once again. It's not achieved through active striving, but through letting go, leading to the creation of fresh space within the existing dynamic. So this newfound space can play a crucial role in generating new possibilities, common grounds. Humility and generosity. So this quality describes a relationship and demands the existence of an other. Because the humility, that willingness to step back or let go of their own positions, the desires, or their ego-driven pursuits are for more than the self. It creates a space for themselves and others together and open the door to new opportunities, value propositions. So it's relational for mutual benefit. This represents a relational attitude that counters othering. It counters othering and embraces mutual benefit. The intention and commitment behind this virtue fosters a co-creative relationship. Or in another word, the small self, the me, the you, the singular self, expands into the plural selves, the us. So in fact, in Chinese culture, it's expected and encouraged that those that are in a more advantageous position to practice this virtue more, to give grounds to the less privileged and the less powerful. It also affirms that Chinese philosophy traditions treated the questions about virtues as something not just individually possessed personal characters, but as a concept with relational and dynamic aspects that needs to be discussed and cultivated in the daily interactions with others. So this recognizing and embracing of Tui and Zhang is rooted in a deep awareness of the nonlinear nature of reality. A nuanced understanding of yin virtues enables us to transcend linear value judgments of seeming dichotomies like backwardness and forwardness, like black and white, dark and light. This shift in mindset holds particular value in a world dominated by modern Western thinking, where it challenges our reliance on linear growth paradigms and the relentless pursuit of profit, as well as our belief in solving the climate crisis and other global challenges through the constant addition and accumulation. Think about the documentary, The Year Earth Changed. What else might happen if we chilled? Lastly, using a very familiar Chinese concept in the West to summarize, the core of yin virtues, wu wei, non-purposive action. So while wu wei, especially in the West, has been predominantly associated with Taoist philosophy, I'm going to, as a conscious effort, draw on Confucius teachings to conclude. Clearly, there are nuanced differences between the Taoist wu wei and the Confucius wu wei, but I think for today's purpose, we don't need to go to that level. So in the Doctrine of the Mean, from Book of Rites, such, the Tao, being its nature, it becomes prominent without any display, produces changes without motion, and accomplishes its ends without action. So understanding how the Tao operates and shapes the world through wu wei, non-purposive action, it guides our approach to self-cultivation, which is at the core of this tradition. Essentially, the values and the principles of self-cultivation help us appreciate the virtues that are not as evident or obvious, sometimes even superficially considered as bad, like stillness, lack of movement, backing off, yielding. Losers do that, right? But as I have hopefully shown successfully, that they are an integral part of keeping harmony and balance of the dynamic whole, the oneness, the cosmos. Or in another word, cultivating these more unassuming and reserved qualities help us appreciate this, which is it's easy to do, but harder to do the non-do. So I really hope by looking at them deeply to uncover insights into how cultivating more yin qualities, both individually and collectively, can support the overall well-being of our modern psyche and society. The process of writing this dissertation has certainly been so transformational for my own self-cultivation journey. So the limitations of my work mostly lies in my opinion, lost in translation. When I look back the past 3 years of writing this to the best capability that I can, the constant struggle was to articulate a reality that is essentially non-dual and non-linear in a language that is grounded in duality and lineality. The best imperfect analogy that I can come up with to illustrate this challenge is for us to imagine two worlds, the world of circles and the world of squares. So what I was facing was trying to express circles in squares. Think about it. Think geometry. When, the squares and circles don't comply, they don't work in the same way, right? So how do I explain what circles look like, functions, feels like, smells like in squares that don't really have the same shapes and principles and axioms? That's in geometry again. So, and also I want to say that I'm not trying to insinuate one is better than the other, right? I'm not even saying circles is Chinese and squares is the West. So I don't want to suggest that the shapes have any implications of my analogy. I'm simply saying that the world has been overpopulated by one shape, and we need more shapes. We need triangles, cylinders, right? So we need more shapes so that we can really ensure diversity, sustainability, but also just really a more complete view of the world that we're in. A couple ideas for future research. Theoretically, I think we could go deeper into exploration into these yin virtues. There are many more that I did not touch on in the dissertation that are less known in the Western thought tradition, and also sadly increasingly being forgotten in China. And practically or clinically developing focused practices aimed at cultivating yin qualities. There are established ones within this long tradition: calligraphy, Tai Chi practice, meditation, guqin, music practice. They present potential research avenues for, possibility of bringing in new or modified to reintroduce to the contemporary communities. So this could contribute to the clinical work of addressing the mental health issues that we have in the world today. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to stop share.
All right, excellent. So it's time for the committee to pose a few questions to our candidate. And it's the custom in East West to start with the external reader. So Dr. Yu, I'm wondering if you have a question or two for our candidate.
Dr. Yu, you're muted.
I was saying, Craig, maybe we do the American way, beauty before age. Let Dr. Wang start first.
Oh my God. The Chinese way, actually, we should let the oldest to go first.
The elders
yeah,
first.
The elders first. Yeah, Dr. Yu, please. Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're actually they're doing the backing up, they're yielding. They're both practicing.
Yep.
That's typically Chinese way. Thank you, Dr. Wang. Yeah, thank you, Craig. It's wonderfully presented. River, could you go back to the diagram you showed us?
Mm-hmm.
This we call Tai Chi diagram with two halves in one. There's one lighted area versus the darkened area. We call Tai Chi diagram.
Right.
The movie thing. Okay, so we're talking the same thing. Could you maybe comment on the dots? You find a light dot in the darkened area, vice versa. You find a light dot in dark area. You find black dot in the light area.
Right.
Could you make comments on dots?
Absolutely. So let me just share with you all again. Here, what Professor Yu is saying is this is the animated. So as you know, this Tai Chi diagram was Zhou Dunyi came up with it, and in the many hundreds, at least would it be 1,000 years ago, I guess. So back then they don't have computer generated programs to make a animation, right? So I think basically this Tai Chi diagram, which looks like it has clear demarcated lines, is exactly why I think gets often mistaken by those who are not rooted in the Chinese consciousness, right? So the white part in the white dot in the black half, and then the black dot in the white half signifies the extreme of those. So the white dot in the black half it has the most power of this half. So it's the Lao Yin, Lao Yang, right? So it's the, and then, so it transformed it. It's just I don't know how to really describe it. So the two dots in the Tai Chi diagram represents the most concentrated energy of themselves that is different from what they're in. And this again is trying to depict, or Zhou Dunyi coming up with this diagram is trying to explain, you cannot slice this into halves, that these two have to be, these are the seeds, and the seeds of yin and yang, but these opposite colors, right? And when we think about seeds has the most power, most energy. So even though they're smaller in its, there's so many paradoxes in that diagram that I don't know if I answered a question, but it's such a, I hope I did.
Yeah, let's stay with it. And the dots. I'm glad you said the last, the seeds. So in the yang region, you find an yin dot seed, vice versa. Don't take them statically. They're dynamic. They're moving as time goes on. They're incessantly moving.
Yes.
So let me use a very simple illustration. It's just like we describe moon, the waning and the waxing.
Yes.
So I want you to see it as these dots. Speaking of in the yang area, the yin dot, the seed, is ever growing.
Right.
Like waxing and waning. So as time goes on, what's latent would become manifest and vice versa. So let's go further, a little bit further. You touched on also minutes ago, touched on so-called phenomenon. The flip side of the phenomenon is noumenal. In Greek philosophy, you're looking at the interplay of so-called phenon and noumenal. Phenon is what is manifest, what's visible, what's seen. Noumenal is what is unseen. So these are kind of interplay. So what is in latent would become manifest as time goes on. It is also interplay of what's inside and what's on the outside.
Right.
So what we see is mainly we put so much emphasis on what's seen,
right.
What's on the surface. What's seen is a reflection of what's on the inside. Let's put it another way, River, is what is seen is just a phenomenon. You use a term relevantly. What's seen is just a fraction of what's unseen. You talk about Xing, the Chinese translation is heart, which is very much equivalent to the Greek terminology pasuke. Translation is psyche.
Is what, sorry?
Is psyche, we call pasuke in Greek terminology. So which is in translation is psyche.
Psyche, okay.
Psyche, so in Greek terms is psyche, Xing will involve three major things. Is a thought process, and your feelings, and your purpose, your will. So these three things put together make up the concept of Xing in Greek terms, which is very similar. So we as Chinese, we don't dissect the term that logically, methodologically. But the term itself remains the same. You involve the three major areas of human life. The thought patterns, emotions, feelings, sentiments, and the will, purpose. So what we see is the inner cultivation would be the cultivation improvement of these three areas of Xing, heart, which will be reflected in our behavior.
Yes.
That is the main thing called self-cultivation.
Right. And I think that's actually very, is what I really love about the self-cultivation tradition in my, writing this is that it really is not about just closing the door and then being yourself, right? It's really about practicing actively on a daily basis, right? With everything around you, people, animals, right? The road, or I don't know, the books that you're reading, and constantly having that highly aware state of awareness, so that nothing seems to intruding and nothing seems to impeding, because you're just one, right? I think I definitely am not there, but I think the goal of self-cultivation is to become one with the universe, right? To 天人合一, and that is very much of at the core of I think aspirations of Chinese philosophers, scholars, right? 文人 we call them.
Yeah.
So
we have to start from somewhere. So the beginning point, in my view, would be start from yourself. Use the term also wisdom. We look inward, introspection to begin with. Then how do you expand yourself, cultivating yourself from inside out? That's the way to go, which will be reflected eventually in your behavior toward other environments, so on and so forth. Then also one more thing I would like to reflect upon, Father River, is you talked about Jing, translated as stillness, quietude. Jing, stillness, quietude, right translation. Etymologically, because you touch on that, but you didn't really go to that. In 说文解字, Dictionary of Etymology, you find it's so-called we have 6 ways of making Chinese characters, words, very well, 六书. So one of them happens to be, we call it 形声, 形状. The phonetic, 形 means graphic, 声 means phonetic. So on the left, 静, stillness, the 清 is very clear, it's 清. 清 means the upper part, which is a growth. 生, 清, so means in today's translation, I'm afraid literal translation, 静 partially is a greenness. We talk about environment. 清, the greenness. I don't think we need too much explanation. Everyone knows how to go for green. So 静 is greenness. Greenness inside, greenness on the outside.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, that's, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, that's it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you, Greg.
June, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yeah. I think the whole presentation is very beautiful. The PowerPoint made, and especially the calligraphies you added to each of the character. So as a Chinese, we can really appreciate the beauty of the character, and which is also an important part of your dissertation. So I really appreciate that, and so it's very clear. I think I just want to maybe add a little bit more what Dr. Yu talked about the Jing, because it's such an important character. So there's I think the Qing, the left part of the character Jing, is now we think about it as a greenish or blue green, like Chinese paintings called 青绿山水. So this Qing, we have a lot of character have this radical, like a Jing, like the essence, like a clear Qing. So this radical, although it's called greenish, but it also means the distracted color from the plant, from grass, and because qing is what we use to dye clothes. When you in the ancient time, so when we dye clothes, we use the most the essence of the plants, whatever plants you use. You can use blue colored plants, you can use purple. That's the most beautiful of nature, actually. That's Qing really means for me, I think, the essence of things. So every Chinese character with this radical is always a good character, like Qing, like Jing, right? So I just want to point it out that when you parallel with the Oxford Dictionary definition and the Chinese, I just feel it's so different, right? The English definition already make this sounds so bad, lack of action, lack of motion, completely misunderstood, like what is really mean, like in the Chinese character meaning. And I think what Dr. Yu already added this the meaning of this character in depth. So I think there's several layers perhaps of this character, because when we see it, I think the Jing, this stillness, is often interchangeable also, or synonymous with the other character, have the same radical, but with water on the right, on the left side. So Jing means clear, means pure, purified. So that's why in Taoist, we say how to do wu wei, how to do non-action is qing jing. So qing jing and is the path to wu wei, right? So when you understand what is qing, qing means, say again, have the same radical qing, but with the water on it. So the essence of water is clear, is clean, is clear, right? So this all about the essence of things. And then so the nature was embedded in this clear, very, so when nature to be allowed to be itself is very clean, pure, and quiet, and this Jing has both the clarity and stillness, because without clarity, it's hard to be stillness, right? So your mind have to be clear, and then you can settle down. It's like a river, all the muds deposit when your mind become quiet. So this Jing is a quietude, the tranquility of the mind, and then it's become clear. So I think cultivating the self, we need to have more this quality of the nature as well, right? So I just want to add that each character actually can be discussed in a endless way. I'm sure there's we don't have time to go into the details of each of the character, but I like the way you present these characters, give the opportunity for people to think about and to relate it to self-cultivation.
Thank you, Jun. Yeah, and I think, again, calligraphy, right? The status of a calligraphy in Chinese art forms is considered the highest. I think there is a reason why, right? Because as you're practicing the calligraphy, the words, I almost feel like the meaning, what it represents, the numerals of these specific every single characters comes through, and then as you're writing it. And then the reason Wang Xizhi is such a great calligrapher, not that I'm not an expert on calligraphy, but some commentaries that I read about him is that every character would appear differently depending on which, the same character would appear differently in one piece. And that is, I think, shows how he is interacting with his brush, the paper, his numerals, right? And then the thing that he's trying to create, it's so much more dynamic than just a font.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I don't have really any specific questions except comments. I think.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think I also I like the way you talk more about your experience in your dissertation, actually, how you grow from more like westernized perspectives about the world, and then you change to a more rediscover the cultural root of China, and then your writing process is very transformative. I think that's so important. As you said, it pains you and also drives you to write. So this work is both personal and also very much, because it says so much to the East and West, how we communicate, you know, although with all these challenges of language, of culture, of different systems. So I think you seem like you're exploring a way, you know, to better understand the Eastern culture. So I just wonder if you have more to say that. What's your experience? At the beginning, I'm sure it's very painful and challenging, but in the end of your writing, for example, now, how do you feel, you know, this East and West communication?
Oh, where do I begin? Yeah, I think never thought about that, but I mentioned it's been very transformative for me. And I was recently asked by a friend over lunch, you know, what is self-cultivation? I got stuck, and that person is right here today, actually. And then I was stumbling, trying to explain what self-cultivation is, right? And then that's when I realized that, right, I have been in this topic for so long, and I'm so sort of, I think it's common sense now. Like for me, it's like, wow, how would anybody still not know what self-cultivation means, right? That's because I've been in this, reading this and doing this. So for one, my hope, or one of my plans maybe, is, you know, after graduation, I will continue this work in terms of getting more people to know about, you know, the Chinese ways, the traditional Chinese, you know, culturally, even though, you know, politically, we're really not in the best position to do that situation right now. So, and then on East-West, in my you know, like in my dissertation, I talked about, I was born in China, grew up in China. I was always the kid that had the best English, and I hugely benefited that. I got a really good job, you know, working. I worked for major US corporations. I worked for the US government, senior officials, you know, and that's all because I was so bought into the Western worldview. I really was communicating seemingly fluently, you know, seamlessly. And I thought, you know, the West, you know, I myself went through this progress. I thought everything West is rosy and beautiful and perfect. And oh my God, freedom and democracy. Oh my God, we need that, right? And that comes from where, I guess, also partially the era that I was born, right? I was born in 1980 and went through this very socialistic, you know, education, where I was told, right, West is better, right? Math, physics, and chemistry, right? 学好数理化，走遍天下都不怕. These three are the most important subjects, right? Science, right? So all of that mentality, I was like, oh yeah, that is right. And I benefited from being able to communicate with the West, right? Being able to have very good English than my peers. And then comes to CIS, you know, the reason I came here was, you know, Trump got elected. I was working for the State Department of Energy on, you know, bridging US-China climate deals, climate policy programs. And Trump got elected, you know, the secretaries that I was working for, you know, political appointees left. And so I got depressed, really seriously got depressed, right? And then not diagnostically, but you know, then I found CIS, and I think CIS is not like one of the most famous institutions. Sorry, I'm just kidding. You know, institutions out there, but it really is a And then I have friends from China that's in CIS. They're saying, oh my God, I found China in the US. And I said, no, you didn't find China in the US. You found China in CIS. CIS is a very special place that it doesn't represent America, right? And what I was able to do in the past 6 years of my PhD study is I was able to really go into, like, I think there's noumenon happening, right? That I was somehow taken and brought and led by forces that I don't know. And I wasn't force-fed anything. I didn't have to write anything that I didn't feel compelled to write, to express. And then the more I dig into the Chinese classics, that's what Confucius wanted all his students to be doing, right? That's what Wang Yangming wanted the whole China to be able to be themselves, unique, right? Uniquely themselves. So the more I dug into the Chinese civilization, the more I realized that there is such respect for individuals, for the uniqueness of the self, but that doesn't take away the fact that you are in the world, right? You are part of the world. You're part of nature. That concept doesn't even exist in any other culture but the Western culture, right? The separation of the natural world from the human world. That's a very Western, uniquely Western invention. So, I mean, I don't know where I'm going anymore, but but June, I think I wouldn't say that ultimately the world looks the same to everybody. I think I really do believe that language does create the world that we are in, which is why translating the Chinese wisdom, Chinese civilization, Chinese culture value systems into English, as best as we can, describing it. You know, this person who is an American philosopher, and you know, he has 2 volumes of this book, and I was so sad that I really discovered his book in the last year of my writing. He recreated a language in English, using English, to describe the worldview of the oneness of the reasonableness, the li of it. That I think it's very necessary because we have been, you know, the modern world has been just immersed in Western thinking for a few hundred years. We really, you know, the world is not really as good of a place that I thought it was back when I was younger. So I think where I am right now is that I feel like I actually have a worldview now. I did not have a worldview. I understand what worldview means in English, but what the hell is worldview? Now I do. Now I know that not only my own worldview, which is still shaping, because still constantly, I'm still bringing stuff in, but I also kind of can see that the worldview essentially of the West and the worldview essentially of the Chinese are really quite different. We're not looking at the same thing, but we should look at the whole thing.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
June, any other questions, or are you good? Okay. Well, River, I have a question. Before I ask it, I just wanted to say how much I appreciate your work. Years ago, when you came to me with this topic, I can't remember if we talked about it in person or by email first, but I remember my reaction, which is I thought, oh, this is going to be great. This is such a great topic. And I've thought that all the way through, and my appreciation has increased with the work that we've done together. And as you know, for a long time, I've had a deep love of Chinese philosophy, particularly Mencius and also the Neo-Confucians. But in many respects along the way, I've been your student as well, because I've learned so much that I couldn't have learned otherwise about those, and I'm really grateful for that. I've taken part of your written work and I put it in that that file on my computer with the other stuff I'm studying, like the good stuff, right?
Thank
So
you.
it's there, so I can look at it later. And also appreciate your help with pronunciations that I still haven't mastered, but I'm trying. So there's some words that came to mind during your presentation, which I just thought was excellent. And I was thinking clarity, eloquence, depth, brilliance, passion, scholarship, and of course, spirit. And I could say so much more, but I don't want to take up all the time with it. So just wonderful, wonderful work. I so much appreciate it.
Thank you.
So my question for you is, as you know, there's a lot of talk about different versions of self-cultivation in the West. And of course, at CIIS, this is no surprise. So what I'd like to know is, from the perspective of your work, why is it that in the West, in particular, when we attempt self-cultivation, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, we get on into this path that seems to be only focused on us, and we ignore the world. You know what I mean? It's almost like a kind of, it's been described as spiritual narcissism, and that's kind of an extreme term, but just for ordinary practitioners, sometimes it's a way of ignoring the news and ignoring the conflict that's going on outside of us. So I was wondering if you could say something about your understanding of why we're doing it that way.
Thank you, Craig, and thank you for all the kind words, and thank you for your guidance. And seriously, it's been, you're the best chair. I've been broadcasting, but you're leaving, so I know there are many CIS students that would have loved to have you be their chair. So on your question, what comes to mind instantaneously is this ambiguity, the concept of ambiguity, that it's clearer, it's more clean, it's less messy to just look at yourself, right? Focusing on the books and doing the formulas, and it's also, I think, connected to the Western Aristotle, Plato ideal of the pure form, right? So it doesn't even exist, right? In that philosophy tradition, as my understanding is that the pure form doesn't exist in the phenomenal world. Like, what is a horse? All the other horses are just horses, right? Nobody is perfect. The concept of horse is perfect, like the concept of hammers, right? That doesn't, so, and even in geometry, the perfect triangle doesn't exist in the world, but they can come up, the mathematicians, the reason they can come up with the axioms and the principles is because they don't need to, they're not measuring, right? The Greeks took the measured geometry from the Egyptians and grew out of that into a pure thinking, right? And then they love pure thinking, which I love too. It's awesome. But we live in the real world, right? We have to 吃喝拉撒睡, right? It's messy. What I just said in Chinese is you eat, you drink, you need to pee, you need to poop, you need to sleep. None of us is clean, right? The world is a messy place, right? So I think, again, back to the yin yang oneness, I think the I Ching or Confucius or Taoists, what they all understood, and Zhuangzi, right? What they all really understood is this oneness, this convoluted whole that is never going to be as clean cut as we would like. But that's the beauty of it, right? That's the ambiguity. Again, talk about sense of beauty, ambiguity, 朦胧美, right? It's a sense of beauty, almost like a class of its beauty in of itself in Chinese culture. So I feel like that's why self-cultivation in the West sense, I guess I didn't really do a lot of research into that, but like what you were saying, it's cleaner and then it's easier to practice that than the Neo-Confucian's self-cultivation, where you really have to bring yourself into the world, right? And then, you know, in 大隐小隐隐于山，大隐隐于市, right? Which is if you recluse, the small recluse, hermits, small hermits, small as in, you know, not as, you know, small hermits go to the mountains, they recluse and they meditate. And the big hermits come to the cities. They meditate, they cultivate, they in the world. So, and then I think the foundational philosophers know that it's never going to be a mess. It's never going to be a clean cut approach. It's always going to be messy, ambiguous. So we embrace that. Yeah. We hold it constantly, and be okay with it. And I think the long, like if one gets used to this holding of this sense of ambiguity, you're okay with it. You're not always seeking certainty, seeking absolute clarity, seeking absolute right and wrong, right? So that's another reason why I think in a lot of Chinese philosophical classics, it's not abstract thinking texts, which is why a lot of Western philosophy doesn't believe Chinese has philosophy, right? Because Chinese philosophical texts are told in vivid stories. And in stories, you interpret, everybody interpret it differently, right? Everybody receives it differently. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm thinking too of your mention that we have some of that in the West in bits and pieces here and there. Like I remember Carl Jung saying, you can't really wash a dog without getting wet, you know. But
right.
And I think language too, as you were mentioning, it's such a barrier. I've been rereading some of the Chinese classics, partly inspired by your work on your dissertation. And I picked up the Doctrine of the Mean, and the commentary in the beginning of the book said that that title is actually a very Western translation. And it should be something like, what did they say? The Way of Balance might have been more accurate. And this Doctrine of the Mean, well, it's like you're seeing something on this stretch of a ruler, and like there's this side and there's this side, and so we're going to go in the middle. It's so binary and linear, you know.
And the word doctrine.
Yeah.
Doctrine, ism, logic, nature. I mean, there's so many Western concepts that are really dualistic concepts, right? They don't exist in Chinese until the recent 200 years, since the commissioners came in and started translating the classics. 200-300 years, yeah.
Yeah. I do have one other question, and then we'll go ahead after that and meet in our room just for some brief discussion in the committee. But so there's so many things I can see you doing with this work, but the important thing is what you see you doing with the work. So you said a little bit about this during your presentation, but I'm just wondering where do you think you'll take this next?
Yeah, so what's bubbling underneath, you know, I really haven't been thinking about it concretely as much. I almost don't want to jinx it. I want to pass this first. Is that actually Professor Yu, in his first response to my first final draft, was, you know, you want to make it publishable. And that really stuck with me. And I don't think the whole thing is publishable as a dissertation, right? So what I'm hoping really to do in the near term is to really go into it and as something that could be entertaining to read, and, you know, more focused, not all over, right? I went in a lot of concepts, but just smaller books, maybe just smaller book, like, and just focus on one and then go deeper and maybe expand and bring in different analogies or examples to support it. And that's what I think I want to do in the most near term. And I don't know about, you know, becoming a professor, as, you know, there are not a lot of jobs out there, or assistant teaching, not a lot of jobs for this area, especially, which is already the problem, I think, in the world, is that not enough people care about humanities, right? It's all the AI, which breaks my heart. So yeah, but I am working on this nonprofit for Asian Americans' mental health and well-being. So maybe that could be a platform where I could have, you know, group sessions where I do talk about these things with the people that, like me, come from that place, and then was immersed in that place. They don't even know that they have the oneness in their heart sometimes, right? So to remind them, to remember, and that is an Ishtar's word. She was going to be here, but she has a class. So Ishtar's remember, right? So it's broken into pieces. How do we remember them so that the different members become reconnected again? So yeah, that's my
I'm really glad to hear that teaching and publishing are up for you, because I think you should do both.
Thank you.
Your
Thank you.
scholarship is wonderful, so I'm glad that's somewhere in there too, you know.
Thank you.
So at this time, if Hua, if you would go ahead and put the committee in a separate room, this is everybody else's opportunity to ask questions of River about her very important work. So I think we're ready.
They're gone. Thank you so much all for coming.
Yeah. Now, if you have any questions or, you know, want to have comments or, you know, wants to have some academic discussions, it's the time for that. So I see Colby's hand. Colby, sorry, your hand.
Hi, Colby.
There. Yeah.
Hey, River. First, brilliant presentation.
Thank you.
I really love what you put out there, and I put in the comments that I could see you presenting this in terms of, you know, like YouTube videos and even TED Talks, you know, or something in that way.
Thank you. Do you know anybody?
Yeah, not yet, but I'm actually working on something like that. But as someone who also explores self-cultivation, but, you know, from an expressive arts perspective, I'm wondering, how could you see this approach being applied in doing academic research, especially as it's still deeply embedded in this this colonized kind of very Western approach in terms of doing this? And I'm wondering if you, what are your thoughts around that?
Right. I think firstly, the act of, I guess, what I'm trying to do is a fight against colonization, right? Or the process of decolonizing, to rethink, because the process, you know, I was born and I grew up in China in the 80s. I didn't leave that country until I was 26. So there are so many things that I wasn't aware that was in direct influence of colonization, of imperialism, right? And with that lived experience, now the reason I said earlier that I have a worldview now is because I can see the past with more clarity. I can't say that I can see everything clearly, right? But I have more clarity than before. So that's another reason why I wanted to go into this, translating these, ancient Chinese self-cultivation, not ancient, just like Chinese self-cultivation practices, go into the language and then bringing them out and not redefine, but expressing them in ways that would have been, that in the past has been considered old and useless and weak, which is true. If you look at the Harvard Center on Chinese religion and philosophy, there were 3 generations started from the earlier last century. Sorry, just, in the I can't really remember the names, but the first generation of the Western scholars, American scholars studying Chinese philosophy, and then was criticizing Confucius was bad. And it's, no wonder China lost the wars, right? No wonder China is so weak and blah, blah. China needs this and that and this and that. Even the first wave of commissioners, when they went to China in the 1600s and 1700s, they were saying to Chinese people that if you don't change your language, you are going to be exterminated. That this archaic, written, graphic-based language is what's preventing you from advancing, right? So, and then the second generation, going back to the Harvard thing, the second generation of philosophers started to see, well, there is actually value in Chinese philosophy. There is actually value in the way that Chinese sees the world and then the way they talk about the world. And then the third, the current one, like I quoted a couple, like Tu Weiming is, I would say maybe the third. So would say right now they're moved on to the fourth generation. They're completely different now, right? They are really trying to draw, things that they find that's gems from this alternative thinking system. And people like Brooke Ziporin, creating an entire whole different way of narration using English to describe the world that's conceived by the Chinese. So I think that is that history in the past 100 years is in of itself a process of decolonization, right? And then your first part was about how self-cultivation can be in the academic. Oh yeah, so I think in the academic exercise of looking into the self-cultivation tradition, again, it's the what are being focused on, what are these key concepts that are being discussed over and over and over again for 2,000 years, right? No joke. Every few hundred years, people are going to, they develop their own, and then based on the Confucius and the Taoists and then the Zhuangzi, and then also then in Han Dynasty, Buddhism came, and Buddhism, the translation of the Buddhist scriptures using the Chinese language, and then evolving from then. I think it has its scholarly value because, again, the way we talk about the world in the scholarships in the Western academia is so West, so dualistic, so
Yes.
linear. You cannot. And then it's so like, sorry, white men out there in this room, I love you all, but like so white male.
It is.
And so they've been dominating the narrative, right? So, and then there are scholars like Craig, my chair, who gave me such freedom and space to do my thing, So yeah, I think there is value. It's uphill battle, but I think it's actually probably a good time, right now in the Western society, as there are more people that are more aware, right? The indigenous culture uprising and trying to understand different sides of the story. I think there is little more momentum than before.
Thank you. Yeah, I could go on. I had a discussion with a Taiwanese friend of mine about the differences of languages between Chinese and English, and how it's even in context. And like, if you change the tone of a word, that completely changes the meaning. Like say the word for horse versus the word for mother. You know, you don't
or for swearing.
Yeah, or swearing. Yeah, and I remember getting confused. It's like, wait a minute, can't you just figure out what I'm trying to say? I'm using the word, but it's like literally replacing one word with another. Saying, I want to ride a horse versus I want to ride your mother, which would be two completely different contexts. And forgive me for
right. That's why the consistency. That's why I really want put it in this. Spend a few minutes on that point. Is the continuity of the text. It really ensures meaning, and then the heritage, the consistency of the heritage, which I don't think it's seen anywhere else in terms of the length of it and the breadth of it.
Wonderful.
Hi, Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kobe.
Hi, River.
Hi, Scott.
Oh, what an absolutely beautiful presentation. I just
Thank you.
how I want to describe it is this, that it was calligraphy
Thank
in
you.
the English language.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
So, you know, it was very prescient that you mentioned us white men in your group here, because my question really was, okay, so here I am, a dyed in the heart Westerner, trained in the Western tradition, trained as an attorney, trained in how to be logical and rational and blah, 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 on and on and on, in a very dualistic language in a dualistic society.
Hey, you found your way to CIS, so kudos to that.
So what do you do? How from my being immersed in that perspective, I have my own ideas and I have my own answer to this question, but from your perspective, what would you recommend?
Well, Scott, as those who don't know, Scott and I were in the same cohort. So we went through 2 years of class together. We were in, so I know you, and so I think that you've been doing that, right? You have been when you began the journey at CIS, for sure. And again, I don't think the goal is to completely, you know, when you are grounded in linearity and duality, and that's not necessarily bad, right? But to be aware of that, there are two, or not necessarily two, there are multi, right? It's just that it's messy, it's one, it's, you know, it doesn't have to, you're no longer practicing law, right? So that's so I guess just to be okay with, almost I want to be okay with having emotions, be okay with crying, right? And that, you know, connected this to this, right? The body to feel that you are with your body, respect it. When you are sleepy, take a nap, right? So yeah, I don't know, I think you're doing it. And
I guess the question, part of my question also comes from, because this is a struggle that I have, and in writing my own dissertation right now, I'm like questioning, is it possible to be a participant of the dialogue that I'm having with all these psychic subtle body energies? Is it possible to be a participant and be a writer at the same time? And so I'm immersed in it.
Why do you think being a participant precludes you from being a writer?
Well, intuitively I don't, but I throw it out there because, you know, it's a difficult way of writing, you know, it's a process. I've struggled for 2 years to get my proposal done because, honestly.
Yeah. I think also just the writing process is really painful, right? And that's in of itself a very linear. And then I think as linear as we want, we're humans, we don't really think in lineality. Right, we don't live in lineality in the world. So yeah, it's
like translating into a linear progression, something that's experiential, that that is beyond that lineal expression, you know. So anyway, so
from my experience, actually, in the process, sometimes I get stuck a lot because, you know, trying to really describe that certain concept, how I feel it, right? And then I would just let myself feel it. Like I won't, you know, walking my dog, and just, I'm not always reading. I'm not always adding knowledge to my head. Right. I'm being a lot, just sitting here, you know, at my desk, and just kind of, I'm trying to connect with how I am feeling the concept. Truly, this is really how I am trying, how I've written. And then somewhat direct myself to pay attention to what would that mean in English? You know, what does that feel like in English? And that's how I mean, you know, I still think, you know, there are more people that does better jobs of translating these, but I do think that I did my best. And then it feels good because it really nourishes my own understanding of both worlds.
Well, once again, River, thank you so much. I echo everybody's comments about how wonderful the work was. And so thank you for being here and presenting it.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
So River, it's the unanimous and enthusiastic opinion of your committee that you have passed your dissertation defense. And so it's my honor to be able to call you Doctor.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody. Thank
Many
you.
congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, Professor Yu.
Congratulations,
Thank you all.
Dr. Lu.
I just want to say that my husband is here and he's really been Andrew, he's right there in the room, and you know, I wouldn't really be able to do this without his support. I mean, I mean it, right? He doesn't speak Chinese, but you know, he really was the rock that I really needed it to finish this.
Congratulations, River. Dr. Lu Dahlkemper. Congratulations. Your music came out. It's beautiful, and the world needs to see and hear more of it. So it's wonderful. Congratulations. You earned it. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So our last assignment for you is that you have to celebrate.
Okay.
Which I'm sure you'll do.
I'll help with that.
Yeah. Your final homework. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wow.
You did it.
You.
Yep.
Yeah. Mary Lee, you had a question?
I actually have to get running, but we'll continue to be in touch. But
thank you, Craig.
Excellent.
On publishing, I will probably reach out to you because you definitely know more about that than me.
Please do.
Thank you.
Take care.
I have to go too. Thank you.
Okay.
Everyone.
Thank you, Jun.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Professor Yu.